Our next candidate is Judge Amy Moore. Good morning, Judge.
Good morning.
We'll let you get seated and we'll let our timer get seated as well.
All right, thank you.
You can begin your remarks when you're ready.
Well, good morning, everyone. I first will take a moment to introduce a member of the audience here this morning. My daughter doesn't have school today, so we thought we'd take your daughter to work day to the next level. So I'm very honored she chose to be here in support of me today. I also want to thank all of you for your service on the commission. This is a lot of work. I recognize that, and you're all volunteers, and I appreciate that not only as a candidate here today, but also as a member of the bar and the judicial branch. In talking with a number of you prior to this morning, it came up quite often that I am absolutely honored to serve as a district court judge, and I love the work that I do. So that begs an obvious question: why am I here? The work I most enjoy doing as a judge is having the opportunity to take a deep dive into a case, fall into research rabbit holes, and craft the best ruling that I can. And a position on the Court of Appeals would allow me to do that work full time. So that's why I'm here today. I believe I'm deserving of your nomination here today based on my diversity of experience, which includes work in the public sector, in private practice, and also as a judge, in addition to my character and my work ethic, which are shaped by my belief that ultimately the practice of law is a service profession, and it's incumbent upon all of us to do more than just our job descriptions and fulfill our roles as servant leaders as well. I began my legal career practicing solely in federal court, both criminal and post-conviction cases at the trial and appellate levels. I was a brand new attorney, and I was absolutely terrified. And I was also firmly convinced that every judge I appeared in front of would immediately recognize I was out way over my skis. So in order to combat that fear, I made sure I was doubly prepared. I knew my cases inside and out. I knew the applicable rules, the applicable law before I ever set foot in a courtroom. And that was good training for me. It was during that time that I also learned the importance of mentorship of young attorneys, as well as the impact that feedback from a judge can have on an attorney. After I stepped away from the law, I came back with a new perspective and a willingness to practice in areas I'd never even considered: family law, probate, contracts and helping people form small businesses, juvenile law, other areas, and I continue to do criminal and post-conviction work. I also became a certified mediator, and I became trained in collaborative practice as well. I've been an unabashed supporter of alternative dispute resolution ever since. I've had the honor in serving in 2 judicial roles, which have also lent to my diversity of experience, certainly. I've been a magistrate, and I now serve as a district court judge. And in both those positions, I've had a wide variety of cases and a wide diversity of parties that have appeared in front of me. As a magistrate, I handled cases ranging from money judgments, evictions, committals for substance abuse and mental health. I was also on call for search warrants, emergency commitments, and also to do weekend initial appearances, which in a college town can be interesting some weekends. And many times I found myself in my pajamas at 3 a.m, meeting with law enforcement and trying to explain to my dogs that no, the nice policemen were just here to work with me and weren't cause for concern. As a district court judge in 2B in our judicial district, I cover a wide swath of geographic territory, certainly. We cover larger, more urban areas such as Fort Dodge, Ames, Marshalltown, and also fairly rural counties as well. We see it all. I have a wide variety of cases that I see. I went back and looked at a recent court service day where we schedule hearings every half hour. And I went from initially hearing a motion to dismiss on a state tort claim immediately into a felony sentencing. I then had a name change hearing. I then covered a motion for summary judgment on a contract dispute. And then I went right into a temporary matters hearing and a dissolution. And this was all before lunch, to my court reporter's endless delight as well. I also enjoy that level of diversity in my trial experience as well as a district court judge. Again, in a recent trial rotation I had initially a felony bench trial, and that was immediately followed by a dissolution modification. I went directly from that trial into a construction contract dispute that was also a bench trial, and the damages claimed were in excess of $1 million. And I went directly from that trial to the appeal of a county drainage district. So certainly in very rapid succession, I had a very varying docket in front of me, but that also mimics what the work of the Court of Appeals does as well. I credit the gumption that I have to pursue new career opportunities and my work ethic and my character to the examples that my parents set. My dad grew up just outside of Duncombe, Iowa, on a small farm, and went literally to a one-room country schoolhouse. I tell that to some people, and they kind of give me a strange look, like Little House on the Prairie was our family story. But he went from that experience to being the first in his family to graduate from college, and then was recruited by a Big 8 accounting firm. And by all accounts, he'd made it. But he had a career dream of owning his own accounting firm. And he and my mom also wished to move their young family back to Iowa and raise me and my brother here. So with my mom's support and 2 young kids in tow, we came back to Iowa, and he opened his own practice as the sole breadwinner for our family without a single client. And I watched him succeed. And not only did I watch him succeed his professional dream, I then watched him turn around and support my mother in hers. My mom also had a career dream of becoming an attorney. And when I was in the 5th grade, she began law school at Drake and commuted from our house in Nevada every day to class with 2 kids at home. And my dad, my brother, and I were beyond proud when we were there when she was sworn in as a member of the Iowa Bar. Like my parents, I wouldn't be here today or wouldn't have gotten where I've gotten without the support of my husband and our children. And he and I also, too, try to provide an example to them of service beyond self, the importance of being involved in your community, volunteering. My husband somehow manages to be my biggest cheerleader and my most constructive critic all at the same time. I have found that some of the best things that have ever happened to me, personally and professionally, have been a result of pushing beyond my comfort zone, which can certainly be a scary prospect at times. I walked away from a fledgling career as a public defender to go to culinary school. I opened my own business as a solo practitioner, signed a lease, hung a really nice, pretty sign, and I didn't have a single client or a source of income. I took the leap to apply to be a magistrate and then later a district court judge. And I'm here today, again, pushing beyond that comfort zone to apply for a position that does the work that I truly enjoy doing and that I would love to have the opportunity to do full time, and that is to be a judge on the Court of Appeals. And I believe the diversity of my experience, my work ethic, and my character make me uniquely suited to this position, and I'd be honored by your nomination here today. I'll open it up to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. We'll start the questioning with Commissioner Hoytink.
Thank you, Judge Moore. Thank you for your application. We talked about this when we met, but talk to me a little bit about your experience as a business owner. As shared, when you're running a business, you have to hire people, you have to manage people, you have regulators, you have competitors, you have customers. How does that inform your perspective as a judge?
Well, and it actually informs my perspective from way back. As you heard me just say, I watched my parents as small business owners, both of them, with my dad with his own practice. My mom at one point was a solo practitioner herself. My husband is an entrepreneur, and I know what it's like, both from growing up as well as in my married life, to wonder if you're going to make payroll, be concerned about your employees, be concerned about making the rent potentially. And it influences my work both as an attorney and now as a judge in giving that perspective that you may not necessarily have if that wasn't your background in the parties that appear in front of me, as well as my approach to my own job as far as a work ethic is concerned. I wasn't raised in a way that anything's handed to you, and I watch people work very, very hard to achieve what they wanted. And I see that now in my own family, having been in private practice myself, as well as my husband with his own small business, and that influences who I am and how I work.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chase.
Thank you for your application. You mentioned the rural and urban aspect of 2B, where you are a judge, and I just wondered how you feel that will enhance what you bring to the Court of Appeals.
And again, it's the perspective issue as well of what that lends to your experience. And I know as an attorney, I had the opportunity to represent folks from all walks of life and all sort of living environments, be it small town, bigger city, or extremely rural. And I think it's just, again, a piece that lends to your perspective and how you view the cases in front of you. What are the concerns of those parties? Is that impacted by, where they live, how they grew up, their ability to access justice? I think those issues too play into our access to justice issues, in that in some of our rural counties, we see it a lot. There is no public transportation. There's no means for people to even get to the courthouse or potentially participate in a hearing or trial. So all of that influences how I look at these cases and how I look at parties that come before me.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pearson.
Good morning, and thank you for your application. When we met, we talked about transitioning to the Court of Appeals should you be appointed. And one of the comments you made is that you need to know what you don't know. So share with us how that has served you well in the past and how you see that would be beneficial in transferring should you be appointed to the Court of Appeals.
Absolutely. And I think my early experience in federal court and the terror I experienced made me realize the absolute importance of exactly what you and I talked about, of knowing what you don't know and being aware that you're not going to be the resident expert in every area of law. Obviously, the folks you have that have applied for this position here today have a wide variety of experience and different levels of depth and breadth in areas of law. But the biggest thing for me has always been, both as an attorney and as a judge, to recognize when I'm in an area or field that isn't one that I typically covered or one that I don't necessarily have a lot of depth, and to recognize that and take the effort to educate myself so I'm up to speed and that I can address those issues as I should, as opposed to just charging ahead and making the assumption that you know more than you do. I think whether you're an attorney or whether you're a judge, that's actually when you're most dangerous, is making those assumptions when you shouldn't.
Thank you.
Commissioner Picklett.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Judge. Nice to see you again. I'm very fond of 2B, and I think you've done a great job. But one of the things facing this group is, and we're all very aware of it, is the caseload in front of the Court of Appeals and questioning who has the horsepower to take on that caseload. I think you've done a good job in talking about the breadth of experience that you have on 2B, but I think you should also go back and maybe touch your experience as a magistrate in Story County and maybe the time you were there and the volume that you handled there, please.
Certainly. So magistrates vary wildly across the state in their dockets, even how much they work. In Story County, despite our size, we only have one magistrate. Now that said, I wasn't going to pretend here today that I was carrying the load all by myself. I certainly wasn't. That docket is shared with a district associate judge as well. But that said, I just knew from speaking with other magistrates, going to magistrate conferences, the workload I carried as magistrate was certainly on the higher end of the scale. And I was still in private practice, and I still owned my own business. So that required a certain level of organization, especially too when you have kids and a family and everything else. So I think that heavy volume of cases I saw as a magistrate, handling that docket, continuing to be in private practice and continuing to have a life outside of that, has set me up well for the position I have now, certainly, but also for the Court of Appeals in tackling that workload and having a means to do that right out of the chute.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gray?
Thank you. Judge Moore, how important do you think it is that the judges on the Court of Appeals either have a substantial jury trial background or served as a district court judge?
And that's a good question. I fall in the camp of I don't believe having served as a judge is a prerequisite to service on the Court of Appeals. I believe if folks wanted that to be the case, that could be codified, certainly. For me personally, I believe my judicial experience has been invaluable in preparing me for a potential position on the Court of Appeals. But like I said, I don't necessarily view that as a prerequisite. However, having had that jury trial experience, whether you're an attorney or a judge, to me that's a closer call. I think there's a lot of things that happen in jury trials that aren't necessarily completely or totally reflected in the cold record then that would come to the Court of Appeals. I know just even my experience as a judge, even having done jury trials as an attorney, changed my perspective even now how I view transcripts and records. I can look at something from my lens, having served now as a district court judge, and say to myself, oh, I know what they were doing. But that it isn't necessarily reflected, like I said, in that cold record. So I certainly don't think there's a prerequisite there either way for either service as a judge or having done a certain number or level of jury trials. But I do think, like I said, for me it's been invaluable, and it's just a distinct piece of someone's diversity of experience that you have to decide as a commission how much you want to weigh that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hanson?
You mentioned mentorship in your introduction. Have you ever served as a mentor, and what were your experiences like?
Yes, I have, and going back even to undergrad, I have done my best to volunteer for positions in formal programs. I did that in undergrad with incoming freshmen. I don't recall the name of the program off the top of my head right now. I've also volunteered with Creighton School of Law, where I graduated, to serve. They have folks regionally that can meet with people that are interested in going to law school. On a more informal level, I have made it a point, and like I said, the very beginning of my career, that was critically important to me and the mentorship I received. So informally, since that time, I have always been someone that fellow attorneys know they can reach out to, just even to discuss cases if you have a question, but also I'm kind of someone that is known as a person that will talk to people interested in law school, people interested in pursuing the field of law or maybe having questions about it, and always being willing to sit down and talk with people that have those interests as well. So I think that's critically important also to our profession.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bevel?
No question.
Commissioner Hoig?
No question.
Commissioner Henderson?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Stanger?
Thank you.
Good morning, Judge. Thank you again for your application. When we visited, we talked a little bit about the prima donna and black robitis. So I want to talk about your story theater company experience and your bakery experience. And how do you think those experiences help shape the way that you would approach justice for all?
Certainly. So my kids, one of whom's with me today, were involved in community theater. My husband and I tried to then either volunteer our time or other efforts towards our children's schools, certainly, and then other activities they're interested in. So that's how I became involved with Story Theater initially. They're a great organization. I love what they do. They're a children's theater group in Ames, and what I really enjoy about them and having volunteered with them is the opportunity they give, not only those theater opportunities for kids, but they take everybody, which I truly appreciate as well. becoming a pastry chef was certainly not on my radar at all when I went to law school. I had a very focused trajectory. When I decided I was going to go to law school, that was it. I got through Iowa State in 3 years. I got a scholarship to Creighton, and we were off. And I then, in the course of law school, decided I had an interest in being a federal public defender, and so we set the focus on that. And I achieved that goal. And I had always had an interest in the culinary arts, pastry in particular, and it was just something I didn't pursue. It wasn't, I don't want to say a real job, but you know, I was raised by people who took higher education very seriously, as being been the first in their families to pursue that themselves, and that's the goal I had set, and we weren't going to deviate from that goal until I did. And I absolutely 100% credit my husband with supporting me in that decision. He pointed out the fact we were at a point in our lives that if I was ever going to take that kind of swerve and pursue another interest, it was the perfect time to do it. And I'm so glad I did. It was something I always had an interest in and wouldn't have probably ever done it otherwise. And when I say it gave me different perspective, it did for so many reasons, but not the least of which that you need to just occasionally step out of your tunnel and see the world for what it is and the other opportunities that you have, and that, you know, taking a deviation or a swerve isn't the end of the world. I decided to come back to the practice of law, and I made it. I didn't entirely ruin my life or my career by taking this wild deviation, or what it seemed at the time, but I wish more people would do that. And I'm proud to say I've actually, I don't know necessarily inspired is the right word, but I have a colleague that left the practice of law to pursue a floral business. And my brother, who is actually my big brother, he'll tell you otherwise, but after I took my own career deviation, he left a very successful position and pursued his lifelong dream of being a police officer. And he is a police officer in Spokane, Washington, and he absolutely loves his job. So if nothing else, I'm glad I provided that rare moment of it working backwards, but you know, providing that inspiration to my older brother. So
Thank you.
And I see that we're out of time. We'll take cupcakes later if you're willing. But no, thank you very much for your
Thank you.
application, and we'll be deliberating your application later this afternoon.
thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.